Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Today's shiur in the Shvatim series is on the second of the sons of Jacob, the second of the sons of Yaakov, Shimon. And I will get started with this shiur in just a minute or two. But first of all, today's shiur is dedicated in honor of the 36th yahrzeit of Harry Altman, Tzvi Paltiel ben Aaron Chaim HaKohen, Zichrono Livracha, by his children Neil, Stephen, and Brenda. In merit of the unselfish devotion, inherent kindness, and unwavering sincerity that defined his character, may his soul be granted perfect rest, al kanfei hashchina, and may our learning today be Iloi Nishmato. I wanted to draw your attention before we get started in our shiur to, instead of moving this to the end, which I tend to do, I put my email address at the top here of our chat. So for two purposes. First of all, for those who would like to continue a conversation about the shiurim b'simcha. And second of all, I think soon, hopefully over the summer, I'll be starting what some have encouraged me to do, which is a Substack, which is an entirely optional I guess, email list where I will be writing in very, very, very occasionally, mainly about our adventures in farming up here in the Galil. So links to a blog that I keep, but additionally any kind of articles I might write or upcoming shiurim, and of course it's totally optional and one can unsubscribe at any point, and of course it's entirely free, and I will be writing very sporadically and occasionally. But if you are interested in joining the Substack, then please do send me an email and I can just add your email list to this growing list. The second link that I have is to my book, which is available on Amazon. And it's a nice complement to the shiurim. And for those who are familiar, a lot of the shiurim are based on the research for this book, although I tend to play fast and loose in shiurim with associations that I might not have written up in the book. And then the third link here, over here, is to an article that I wrote, I think a couple of years ago, that is up on the Lehr House, which is a great online magazine of Torah and Jewish content. This is an article about Shechem, and I linked to it here because it is very topical and related to the personality of the tribe of Shimon. It even is his symbol on his standard, as you see over here. So the article deals with the different layers of Shechem, and we won't have a chance in this series to do a deep dive into the personality of this place, the personality of Shechem, because we're limiting ourselves to the personalities of the Shvatim. But Shechem is so integrally part of Shimon's personality that I would be remiss if I didn't put that link to that article there for you to check out. Okay, so now
I'm sorry, Tamar,
yes.
where are
Again,
these
because
links?
I just got on. Can you
Where
put
are
in those three
We're not
links
we're
again?
not
Yes.
on the screen.
Not
It's not
clear
in the
where the
chat.
links
Okay.
are.
First of
Thank
all,
you.
I just yes or no. Does anyone do you see my screen? Do you see me talking?
Yes.
Yes.
You
Okay.
see-
Yeah.
And you see the Shimon in the background? I'm
Yeah.
just saying that I had put up on the chat. If you go down to the bottom of Zoom and you can look at an ongoing chat, I put up three different pieces of information. The first one is my email address. The second one is a link to the Amazon page for my book, and then the third one is the article on Shechem that is related to today's topic of Shimon, who was responsible for the destruction of Shechem. Oh, I have to send it again. Oh, I didn't realize because I see the links are not showing on the chat. Okay. Okay, so let me just copy them over here. Thank you so much for drawing that to my attention. I didn't realize. Here we go. I'm just copying these three links. So, Okay. And so also for those who are joining us a little bit late, I just a reminder that today's shiur is the Loy Nishmat Harry Altman on the occasion of his 36th yahrzeit, Tzvi Paltiel ben Aaron Chaim HaKohen, Zichrono Lebracha. May our learning today be an aliyah l'nishmato. Okay, so let us get started with Shimon. Shimon, I have this nice little picture here of his standard, of his mateh, of what the Midrash, our Mesorah, will say is essentially his hallmark, which looks either like a tower or a wall, which we will get to shortly, but let that image sink in and hover, a kind of imposing image, but also a protective image. So those two kind of are concepts that we'll explore when we get to the personality of this boy. But let's start with Shimon as a boy, as a concept, as in his conception. Vatzahar od bateled ben. After Leah had born Reuven, the very next verse, so we don't know how much time had elapsed, but someone had asked last week how old Reuven, or 2 weeks ago, how old Reuven was at the time when he went out to gather dudaim for his mother. The assumption of the Midrash is that he was quite young, and that Leah had these children, these first 4 children in very quick succession. She conceived again, and she bore another son, Vatomer, and she said, Ki shama Hashem ki snua anochi. God has heard that I am hated. If this is we see this as in connection with Reuven's naming, Ki ra'ah Hashem et onyi, because God saw my affliction. So Reuven is named after God seeing, and Shimon seems to be named after God hearing. So this anthropomorphizing in a way, or the sense of God being aware of, seeing and hearing and absorbing in all of the different ways that my distress is evident, God has sensed, and he has vayitenli, he has given me gam et zeh, this one as well, vatikra shmo Shimon, and she names his name Shimon. So Shimon is named in the same vein as Reuven, in that he is a response to the pain and the anguish of Leah's positioning within this interfamily dynamic of Yaakov, Rachel, the prime and beloved wife, and then the adjunct wife, the older sister, Leah. Okay, so we sense, as we did with Reuven, that the name itself encapsulates or embodies not only pain, the lashon of snua, I was hated, her bitterness, but a step away, if you will, from, or a step away from her pain, because there is now another son that she has produced, a step towards a relationship with Yaakov. And so it's almost like a lightening and a lessening. And we'll see this with Reuven, Shimon, Levi, and then Yehuda, this gradual release that Leah seems to be expressing. But these 2 sons, at least, are very clearly named after her distress and her pain. But Gam et Zeh, this one too. So I have Reuven, and now I have this one to add to my arsenal. And she names him Shimon. Now, even though the context of the name seems somewhat negative, it doesn't seem to be quite enough of a textual pin for Chazal to insert a positive or a negative reading on Shimon. But that never stopped Chazal, whatever little Tamar might think about whatever the textual basis. Chazal have a unified agenda throughout Midrash, and that unified agenda takes into account the entirety of Shimon's story, which in the main is a fraught, violent, and negative story of the son of Yaakov through his development into a tribe. And so we will see that Chazal will read back into even the naming of Shimon a certain negativity. And let's take a look at some of these expressions. The first place we'll look is Bereshit Rabbah, where in the conception of Shimon and the birth of Shimon, the Midrash has the following to say. כי שמע השם כי שנואה אנוכי וייתן לי גם את זה ותקרא שמו שמעון. זה עתיד להעמיד שונא. This boy, when he develops into a tribe, will produce a hater. Now, the sensitivity here is ki snua anochi, a very strong, powerful word that on the surface of things is expressing how Leah feels about her place within the family. She's hated by Yaakov, perhaps she's hated by Rachel, but Chazal are saying that the sin'ah in the naming, as she's proclaiming his name, it so imprints on him that he will be one to produce in the future a hater. And or as is roughly and poorly translated here, an enemy, but lahamid soneh, not lahamid oyev. He will produce a hater. The hater being a figure from Shimon, who we will meet in the book of Numbers in Bamidbar. That is Zimri ben Salu, the Nasi, or the prince of Shimon, who so hated Moshe that he did an outrageous act, as we'll explore in a little bit. Umi mirapeh makato, who will heal his strike? Who will come to heal him? Gam et zeh Pinchas, shehu atid la'amod milevi. So how the Midrash very cleverly works here is ki snua anochi, Hashem heard that I am hated, or that a hater will come from here, but I presciently, Leah is saying, envision that vayiten li gam et zeh, soon, 9 months from now, I shall have another son who will heal the breaches or the sins or the violations of this one who's coming from Shimon. And who is the healer? Pinchas from Levi. So Shimon and Levi kind of are grouped together. We'll see quite often, but here even in the imagination of the Midrash. What I wanted to point out was the Midrash here is already leveling strikes against Shimon, where the pasuk itself seemed somewhat benign, although contextually fraught. Here the Midrash is sicking it to him, and this motif will continue on through other somewhat clever drash or midrashic readings of the name of Shimon. Matar od vatikra shmo Shimon in Midrash Hagadol, which is a 13th century work, much later than Bereshit Rabbah. My Shimon. What does it mean, this name Shimon, that Leah was naming him? Sham Avon. Wow, is that a drash, right? Looking at the spelling of the name, in this one is sin. Sham Avon. Here you can find problems. This is a problem child. An echo of the same problem that would emerge from Shimon later on down the line when he would develop into a tribe, that his chieftain or the prince, the representative of the tribe, would be such a problematic personality. So here in these two midrashim, Chazal will as they always as they tend to do in midrash, collapse time and read back intimations, allusions within the naming of Shimon that will reach their full expression later on. Now. When Shimon develops into a person in his own right, here we have an example that I was talking about at the beginning of this series of sometimes you have Shvatim for whom there's little to no storyline, like Asher, for instance, and sometimes you have Shvatim who do have storylines of their own within Genesis, within the book of Bereshit, as sons of Yaakov, such as Reuven. We saw stories with him. With Shimon, with Levi, we also see that they have stories, or at least one story, although Chazal are going to say With Shimon, there's three. With Shimon's case, there are two stories, but in the Pshat, in the text of Bereshit, Chazal are going to read a third story into the text. So let's start with the first story where Shimon occurs. This is in the context of Shechem. That's why I linked to that article I had written. That Shechem is one of the seminal layered cities, a city in Eretz Yisrael, which occurs over and over and over again throughout Tanakh and builds its own personality. And it has preceded this story in the 34th chapter of Bereshit already in the days of Abraham. Here it occurs again as Yaakov, upon entering back into Eretz Yisrael after his sojourn in Aram Naharaim and Padam Aram, the household of Lavan, he settles in Shechem. And then we're familiar with the terrible event that happens that Dinah, Batetze Dinah, that Dinah went and she was involved with the girls of the land. She left essentially wandered out, one can say, of the camp of Yaakov. She was spied by Shechem, the prince of the city, whose father Hamor was the king of the city, and she was raped by Shechem. Now, I bring you here. I start here from the 7th verse. I apologize for the poor formatting here. I really would like to figure out how to format to have the translation side by side. I think it would be the easiest. I'm going to try and work on that, but for now, this is what Svaria allows me to do. So we'll just look at the Hebrew, and for those who printed out the source sheets, the English here is on the bottom. The verses immediately preceding this verse, the 7th verse, say that Yaakov was aware of what happened. Vayishma Yaakov. Yaakov heard that his daughter Dinah had been raped, and he was waiting for his sons, and his sons were out in the field. Ubnei Yaakov ba'u min hasadeh kisham'am. This is, if we had the time, which we don't in this context, to go into the 34th chapter of Bereshit, it's, I think, a classic example of looking at a text and seeing all of the questions, the lacuna, the missing pieces that are just hovering right under the surface. Why were they away from Yaakov? Why did Yaakov wait to respond, wait until his sons got back to respond? How is it that they heard when they were out in the field about what had happened? Let's just say that they are the first ones to express a deep dismay. They were exceedingly distressed. Those two languages express their distress at what had happened. Such things are just not done. It was a terrible violation. And Hamor, we're familiar with the story. Shechem tried to build a bridge here and make a brit, make a covenant with the people of the city. And Shechem, the prince, intuits here that the people within Yaakov's camp that he has to appease are not just Yaakov. I mean, we sense this already, because Yaakov is waiting to hear the response of his sons, or is waiting for his sons to return before acting. So Shechem speaks to her father, to Yaakov, ve'el acheha, knowing that her brothers are primary actors here as well, and deciders as to the future of both Shechem and Dinah as a couple, and also to the safety and security of the city. Vayanu bnei Yaakov et Shechem ve'et Hamor aviv b'mirma. Who are the ones who respond, who take the leadership role in these negotiations or in this conversation? Is not Yaakov. It is the bnei Yaakov, the sons of Yaakov, and they respond, and they are and this word mirma is understood by Rashi, at least, to not be that they are dealing treacherously or slyly or trying to trick Shechem and his father Hamor, but rather that Shechem and Hamor never really intended to have a true covenant. So they just so the sons of Yaakov responded in kind, saying, you did a terrible thing. We cannot just give you our sister, but rather you have to go circumcise yourselves so that we can all be essentially one clan, and then we can intermarry within our clans. But if you do not do so, then we're going to take Dinah and we are going to leave. So Shechem and Hamor persuade the citizenry of Shechem, of the city of Shechem, to do so, and they all circumcise themselves. And here is where Shimon re-enters the story. The third day, when the people of Shechem were in great pain, Shimon v'Levi achei Dinah. Whoa, that's a mouthful of irrelevant information, right? And the two sons of Yaakov, Shimon and Levi, the brothers of Dinah, ish charbo, they take up their swords. Vayavo el ha'ir betach, vayahargu kol zachar. They come with great confidence to the city, seeing that the city was incapacitated, and they kill all of the males. And they kill also the leadership, Hamor and Shechem. Vayikhu et Dinah mibeit Shechem vayetzeu. And they take Dinah back and they leave. Now, here is where the rest of the brothers, Bnei Yaakov ba'u al hachalalim, it would seem that the rest of the brothers now at this point, after the city has been, after the males have been slaughtered, and Hamor and Shechem have been slaughtered, and Dinah has been rescued, then the other brothers, it would perhaps, or maybe still these two, return to the massacred city, and they plunder the city, and they take all of the animals and the children and the women. Now, Yaakov, in his response to this, is outraged or very, very scared. Vayomer Yaakov el Shimon ve'el Levi. Yaakov says to Shimon and to Levi, Achartem oti, you have ruined me. Lahavisheni biyoshev haaretz b'knani v'aprizi, to make me odious, to make me stinky, to make me a persona non grata, right? Or to make me seen as a threat to the other peoples, the indigenous peoples of this land. And we are few in number. This is an existential threat to me that you insidiously attacked Shechem. But who has the last word? And with this, we see this wonderful ptucha, meaning that this is where the Masoretic text cuts off. It is Shimon and Levi who respond to their father, Vayomru, Hakizona ya'aseh achotenu. Should we have allowed our sister to be treated like a whore? And they're given the last word in the text. In other words, their attitude or their actions seem to be given some legitimacy by the text, in that Yaakov does not respond here. He will hold his response in abeyance, as we saw with Reuven. But in the Shir on Reuven, I took pains to demonstrate how it seems like the sin of Reuven was not as we might have assumed based on a facile or superficial reading of the text, but clearly indicated a different nature of sin. Here, it is clear that Shimon and Levi, they were responsible for the massacre, and all we know, though, is that they are given the last word here. In other words, their stance, their platform is considered to have some legitimacy, but they will be excoriated by Yaakov on Yaakov's deathbed. Okay, so Shimon and Levi re-enter the scene at this pivotal moment. We know how pivotal it is because I started this year with the Mateh Shimon, with the vanguard, the standard, the degel of Shimon, which according to Chazal depicts a wall, or most likely this wall is Shechem, which is what Shimon is known for, the attack on Shechem. Now, to express a little bit more about what their motivations were, and specifically Shimon in this context. Let's look at the midrashim that are going to tease out the deeper meaning of that very strange verse, that redundant verse. Vayikchu shnei bnei Yaakov Shimon v'Levi achei Dinah ish charbo. We know that the only new information we're given is that the ones who are responsible are Shimon v'Levi. It would have sufficed beautifully for the verse to have read, Vayikchu Shimon v'Levi ish charbo. We already know that they're the sons of Yaakov, and we already know that they're the brother of Dinah. So let's see what the Midrash wants to learn from all of these redundancies. Mimashma shne'emar Shimon v'Levi yadanu shebnei Yaakov hem. Right? It is, we know, what can we learn from this verse? We know that they're the sons of Yaakov. Ela bnei Yaakov shelo natlu etza miYaakov. Vayikchu shnei bnei Yaakov Shimon v'Levi. The subtle reading that Chazal are doing here is that there's almost a pause between bnei Yaakov and Shimon v'Levi. The two sons of Yaakov did not act like Yaakov. This was Shimon v'Levi. Shimon v'Levi acted on their own. So it's not that they were acting in consonance with the thought process or the calculations of Yaakov. So it's almost a dramatic and radical reading of the verse. Yaakov, Shimon v'Levi, that these were sons of Yaakov who did not act like Yaakov. They acted in their own individual calculations, Shimon v'Levi. That the two of them were corroborating on this, and they left Yaakov out of their calculations. Achei Dinah, they were the brothers of Dinah. Now this happens a lot in Tanakh, where we'll have, for instance, like a single parent or sibling listed in or given, that information is given in a certain context. And of course, what that means is that in this context, Shimon and Levi are the ones who were the brothers or the family members who felt most responsibility towards Dinah. Achei Dinah, v'chi achot shneim hayta, v'lo achot shel kol hashvatim hayta. Was she only a sister to Shimon and Levi? Was she not a sister to all of the sons of Yaakov? But because these two were so enraged to the point where they acted and they took revenge for what had happened, then she is called by their name. That they're associated with her. They are Achei Dinah, more even than their siblings. And this is a motif about the care and the not filial responsibility. What's fraternal responsibility that Shimon and Levi, Shimon specifically, Chazal will point out here, took for Dinah over and against all of the other brothers. And they learned this from a curious verse at the very end of the book of Genesis, where the 70 descendants of Yaakov who descend to Egypt along with Yaakov are listed, the genealogical list of the clan of Yaakov, and the sons of Shimon are listed here, Ubnei Shimon, Yimuel, V'Yamin, V'Ohad, V'Yachin, V'Tzochar. So that's kind of one unit. Even the Tameh HaMikra tell you to stop here, that these are the sons of Shimon. And then this curious addition, Shaul ben HaKanaanit, right? Shaul, the son of the Canaanite. We're not given the name of the mother. Perhaps we are in the previous verse. I didn't check. But the mother of Yimuel, Yamin, Ohad, V'Yachin, V'Tzochar. And then there's this another son, Shaul ben HaKanaanit. So because of that curiosity, the Midrash will comment, Amar Rav Huna, will read this verse back into the episode of the rape of Dinah. Amra Dinah, Dinah said, Ve'ani ana olichet cherpati. Where am I going to go? How can I hide my shame? How can I live with myself after this horrific event of rape? Ad shenishba la Shimon shahu notla. until Shimon vowed to her that he would protect her and that he would be her guardian and he would make sure that she was cared for. Hadahu dichtiv, as we find in the lineage of Shimon, the offspring of Shimon, Vishaul ben HaKnaanit. This Shaul was, one can say, a stepson or a godson or a child within Shimon's house for whom he took custodianship. Ben Dinah sheniv ala lekanaani, the son of Dinah who was raped by this Canaanite, by Shechem. V'Rabbanan amrin nitala Shimon ukvara be'eretz Canaan. Chazal extend this care and concern that Shimon demonstrated towards Dinah by saying it outlived her. That even when she died, that Shimon did not leave her in Egypt, but it was part of his legacy that she be returned to Eretz Yisrael and buried in Eretz Canaan, Eretz Yisrael. So I'm what we're seeing here through these midrashim, I think, is a deep concern that is the hallmark of Shimon for the integrity of Am Yisrael, where here you have an individual who is motivated towards to massacre an entire city because of its collusion in attacking or damaging the integrity of the house of Jacob. And when I think of that, I look back at the standard of Shimon. Again, these are images that for which which are based on Bamidbar Rabbah. It's based in a midrashic list of what the different images were that appeared on each of the individual tribal standards. And for Shimon, we have this wall, and I would like to posit that what we're looking at here is the wall of Shechem that Shimon breached, but a wall serves as in both directions. It is a target that I won't let you attack the integrity of my family. A wall is also a protective measure that keeps a family inside and keeps and marks the integrity of a unit by separating it from others. So Shimon, I will start what I started to see here with these midrashim was a concern of Shimon that for the integrity of Am Yisrael, which is demonstrated not only by his flag, but also we saw one of the markers for understanding the character of a tribe was also the stone that was representative of the tribe on the Choshen HaMishpat, on the priestly breastplate, and the stone that is ascribed to Shimon is the pidita, yes, pe yud tet dalet hey, pitita. Which is a topaz or a jade. What is the quality of this stone as far as Rabbeinu Bachya is concerned? Every shiur with the different shvatim, I'll keep on going back to Rabbeinu Bachya because he was the Rishon who identified the quality or the power, as it were, of this stone. Said the pidita had the quality of cooling off the body from ardor, from too much sexual excitement, which is a helpful antidote. Or it's demonstrative. Forget about the helpful antidote for a second. It's demonstrative of a tribe who themselves, enraged with jealousy, were jealous about this sexual violation of their sister. So in that respect, it's appropriate. Its qualities are appropriate for the tribe of Shimon. So here, moving along in developing the personality of this tribe, I'll just do a little segue because as a tour guide, I can't help myself, and I live like 15 minutes from here. One of my favorite sites, for those of you who like who love the Galil and who are well traveled in the Galil, you'll recognize this as the cliff of Arbel. And next time you're in Israel, give me a ring and we can go together to the Arbel. There are so many wonderful stories in Arbel. Here, I am actually looking northward to Har Nitai. I'm standing behind me is Har Arbel, and in front of me is Har Nitai. You know, down here is the Sea of Galilee, the Kinneret. And what I'm looking at here are what are traditionally associated as with the graves of Reuven, Shimon, Levi, and Dinah. You recall the midrash of Shimon taking care that Dinah would be buried in Eretz Yisrael. A great deal of what I do, or at least what I did before COVID, was guiding people who around the north who were very interested in visiting graves of sages. It's a very popular subset of touring the north. And this was always an interesting one because you're talking about biblical figures being buried in the north of Israel. And I'll just tell you that as far as if you want me to put on my academic integrity hat, then the chances of them being buried here are very slim. However, I'll also, with that same academic integrity hat, say that the tradition of Dinah being buried alongside Shimon, of course, that's a midrashic motif, in Arbel is quoted by the Ramban. And the Ramban from the 1200s, it's not a new tradition. It might not be as ancient as Chazal, but it's not new. And so I just wanted to show an illustration of this rabbinic concept. Shimon took her and buried her in the land of Canaan, not too far from where I live. Okay, so
who's there? Shimon, Dinah, Reuven, and who?
Reuven, Shimon, Levi, and Dinah.
Hmm.
Because we need to find somewhere for Reuven and Levi, because it's very easy for us to put Binyamin somewhere in Chevel Binyamin in a different Nachala, and it's very easy for us to put Dan right by Tzora and Eshtaol, right by right by Beit Shemesh, and there are other tribes who have other Shvatim who have who are buried in their Nachalot. Reuven, no one is going to go over to Jordan to go visit the kever of Reuven. So let's kind of collapse these three brothers who are very integrally linked, Reuven, Shimon, Levi. Shimon and Levi, anyway, Achim, we want to put them together. And Shimon and Dinah have to be connected. So when you see a grouping of four graves, then that is what was, I would say, assigned to these graves. But again, we're going on a Masorah that's at least 800 years old. So nothing to sneeze at. Okay, so here is the next time that Shimon comes up. I'm sorry, I wish that the drawback of Zoom is that I would love to ask and have this be an interactive shiur. And I would say, where in the text of Bereshit does Shimon next surface? And the answer that you would give would be in the context of Yosef and Mitzrayim, where, if you recall, Yosef, he holds Shimon in prison while he sends the rest of the brothers back to produce Binyamin. And he says, once you produce Binyamin and you prove to me that you have an additional brother, then I'll release Shimon. Right? We call it Shimon who's held back. That's a curious detail that's often overlooked in all of the dramatic hullabaloo. So he does occur there, and we'll get there in just a few minutes. However, Chazal say there's a third place in the stories of Bereshit where Shimon is hovering, and they're going to throw him in whenever they can. And it's not only Chazal that throw him in, by the way. We'll see. Vayiru oto merachok. The context here in the 37th chapter of Bereshit is the sale of Joseph. So even though the story that I had just mentioned is way after the sale of Yosef, when Yosef is already established as the Tzafnat Paneach in Mitzrayim, and so that's when he incarcerates Shimon. Here we're backtracking a couple of years to the area of Shechem and Dotan. By the way, regarding Shechem, it's no mistake and it's no accident that the brothers leave Hebron when they get jealous of Yosef and go back up to Shechem. They had great successes in Shechem, and they identified and they forged their identities to a large degree of the nation of the clan of Yisrael back there in Shechem. So that's where they go lerot et sonam, to shepherd. Those of you who are familiar with the geography of Israel know that Hebron and Shechem are not close to each other. So they went way up north to Shechem. And Yaakov sends Yosef after them. They see him coming from afar, and before he approaches them, they scheme to kill him. Vayomru ish el achiv. Now we have this ish el achiv already with the anashim of Lamed Daled, of the context of taking revenge for Dinah. So that's where Chazal are going to say Vayomru ish el achiv is not a colloquialism. Well, God, spoke to Reuven, or Asher spoke to Naphtali. No, there were two people involved who are the anashim within Bnei Yisrael, and that's Shimon and Levi. Vayomru ish el achiv. Shimon said to Levi, Hine bal hachalamot halazeh ba. Look at this dreamer coming. Let's v'nahargehu. Let's kill him. V'nereh ma yiyu chalamotav, and let's see what becomes of his dreams. Now, here in the Tanchuma, it makes the connection explicit. Vayomer ish el achiv mihem Shimon v'Levi. Shimon speaking to Levi specifically, and excuse me. The continues the midrash continues on by kachuhu by yashlichu oto habora. They take him, they throw him into the pit, and you remember they do this because they want to save Reuven wants to save Yosef, so he said, "Don't kill him, throw him into the pit."
Tamar,
Yes.
I just wanted to say that it was Reuven and Yehuda that tried to do something to save Yosef. So who's left?
Well, okay, Reuven tried to save Yosef. Reuven clearly tried to save Yosef. Yehuda tried to take advantage of Yosef, and he tried to earn off of Yosef, right? Like he was.
But he tried that he shouldn't get killed.
No, but he wasn't going to get killed. In other words, prior to Yehuda entering into Mabet Salano, what do we get out of this deal, right? Like it was most cynical. It was in a sense perhaps even more cruel than, I don't want to say more cruel than killing him, but like, how can we earn from this? How can we benefit from this? How we get some money from this? Now that happened after Reuven suggested he be put in the bore, and as instead of killing him. So the order of things was that the brothers wanted to kill him. Reuven said, no, let's put him in the bore instead. Reuven went away, intending to save him later, intending to take him out of the bore. Meanwhile, everyone's sitting and feasting except for Reuven, who's off doing tshuva off in the corner. And then the passing Midyanim Yishmaelim come by, and Yehuda's like, he's an opportunist. That's the word I was looking for. What a cheap and awful move. An opportunist. Was wait, but I don't want to get too derailed by the story of Mechirat Yosef because our focus is on Shimon.
I think who has more conscience is Yehuda than Reuven.
It could very well be. I'll tell you. I'll do this when we get to Yehuda, who's going to probably take us at least to Shiurim, and we'll delve more deeply into this story of Mechirat Yosef. Then we'll talk about Yehuda's role there. Okay. And I do, I want to give Yehuda his due, but Shimon's role here is very aggressive. You recall the midrash, "V'habor reik ein bo mayim." I hope that all of you, I'll just speak for myself. When I grew up in Beis Yaakov, and we learned a great deal of midrash. And so for me, "V'habor reik ein bo mayim" immediately means mayim ein bo. There was no water, aval nechashim b'akravim yesh bo. Right? In other words, Vabor Reik ein bo mayim is a redundancy that has to be filled by other kinds of dangers. Yosef wasn't out of danger just because he was in a big cistern, which, by the way, is quite a, knowing cisterns from the Bronze Age in Israel is not just a little hole in the ground. You're in a very deep place. Anyway, Ma'asa Shimon. what did Shimon do? Kevan shenatnu oto letoch habar, when he acquiesced to Reuven's insistence that Yosef be put in the bar, Hayash in the cistern, Hayash Shimon mitzaveh umashlichim alav avanim gedolot. He said, I'm not done with my plan to kill Yosef. I'm going to stone him, right? I'm going to throw heavy stones on him. Okay. And then the Midrash here to contrast Yosef's treatment of Shimon when the inverse happened a few years later, when Shimon effectively was thrown into a dungeon at the behest of Yosef. Aval k'shanafalhu biyad Yosef, when Shimon fell into Yosef's clutches or his authority, Haya Yosef zarek alav ptumot. Yosef gave him some nice fatty chickens, right? Another just to showcase the different treatment. But what I'm pointing out here is that the Medrash, and in multiple places, is going to highlight Shimon's role. Shimon and Levi, Vayamru ish al achiv, but specifically Shimon's hatred of Yosef. And I want to try and first I'll give you a few more examples. I didn't bring them here in the source sheet, but just some other examples of a midrashic motif of where Shimon is identified as the one who so hated Yosef. First of all, Shimon wanted to kill him. Shimon alone was charged with throwing Yosef in the pit. We saw these examples in Bereshit Rabbah. I'm sorry, in the Tanchuma, and they're echoed in Bereshit Rabbah. So both of those midrashic sources identify Shimon specifically. Additionally, he in Sefer Hayashar, which is another book of midrash, when the Midianites were negotiating the sale of Yosef, he threatened to kill the Midianites for keeping Yosef alive. These are, again, building on the same motif. Additionally, we'll see Yisachar. He had a special role to play as well here. When we get to Yisachar, we'll explore that more. He advised tearing Yosef's ketonet pasim. Remember, we said that's what the brothers were talking about, but who had that great idea to do it? It had to be the Talmid Chacham of the family, Yisachar, and the special garment that Yaakov had given to Yosef, that special coat of many colors. Shimon did not want to relinquish that cloak. Shimon was not interested in cooperating with his brothers because they had refused to kill Yosef. Now, that idea is provided not by the Midrashic corpus, but here is where I'll go on a slight tangent and say that remember that though Midrash is, for the most part, the resources we have are from Chazal, there was a great deal of literature that is not considered, is definitely not considered part of our biblical canon, and is also was not included within Sifrut Chazal, and that is the apocryphal and pseudepigraphal literature, literature from 2,000 years ago, beyond 2,000 years ago, the time of Chazal. And here I speak specifically about a specific pseudepigraphal work called The Testaments of the 12 Sons of Jacob, which is the deathbed statements of each of the Shvatim, which is a fascinating work. The reason, by the way, why it's categorized as pseudepigrapha is pseudepigrapha means that it is a work that is attributed to a specific biblical personality. So the biblical personalities here would be the 12 tribes of Israel, the 12 sons of Jacob, each one authoring his own deathbed statement to his descendants. The work comes down to us in Greek, and it is, I believe, canonized in certain denominations of the Christian Bible. I don't know if it's Eastern Christianity or Catholic Church, but they retained this as a holy book. We, in our traditions, do not. However, it is a very interesting resource dating to probably the 2nd or 3rd century Common Era, so around the time of Chazal, which where the themes very often dovetail with midrashic themes within Sifrut Chazal. So I use it as a resource readily. I used it as a resource in this book and in research on the Shvatim. So in the last testament of Shimon and in the last testament of Zvulun, it happened to be these details about the personality of Shimon as bloodthirsty for Yosef emerged. Whereas we definitely, again, see it in Midrash, in our own Midrashic literature, but we see it elsewhere as well. Now, I would like to answer the question, or even ask the question, why? Why is Shimon just a target here for Chazal and for the interpretive world of Chazal? Why was Shimon targeted in the sale of Yosef? The simplest answer and the most elegant answer is that of all of the brothers that Yosef could have chosen to incarcerate, it's weird that he chose Shimon. It would have made a lot more sense to choose Yehuda or Reuven. Reuven being the eldest, so the symbol of the leadership of the family. Yehuda being recognized over the course of the stories in Yosef's time with his brothers as a leader. He was the one who sold Yosef, one can say. So because of that curiosity of why was Shimon the one that was singled out by Yosef? Yosef said, I'm holding on to Shimon. Here, let's take a look. It says, Vayisov Ma'alem Vayefk. Yosef's always crying. It's because he's Rachel's son. Vayashav Alehem, Vayitzaber Alehem. He goes back to his brothers and he speaks to them. And he said, Vayikach Me'itamet Shimon Vayasor Oto Leinehem. He takes Shimon and he incarcerates Shimon after having told them, you got to give me one of the brothers before you go back to bring bring Binyamin to me. And he chooses Shimon, which is
the previous verse, it shows why he didn't pick Reuven.
Sorry?
The verse just before that explains why he did not pick Reuven.
Well, it doesn't only we don't know that that he didn't that would assume, as you pointed out, you said the verse before says Vayan Reuven otam. Reuven's like, oh my God, again with the hand wringing, right? That's Reuven, that's what he does. That's his MO, as it were, his within Bereshit, until he grows into a tribe and learns to properly take responsibility. Vayan Reuven otam lemor, halo amarti alechem lemor, al tachato bayadad. Look what happened because of what we did years back with Yosef, lo shamatem, right? Now it's all coming back to haunt us. I don't quite know why or how. I don't quite know how, but I know why. That's what Reuven is saying. And Yosef overhears this. He understands what they're saying. But that would be assuming that what you're saying here is that Yosef chooses Shimon as a punitive measure, where Yosef is saying, I'm going to get the one who never took responsibility for what happened to me, and in fact wanted to kill me, and was the ringleader of the group that wanted to kill me. But Chazal, when let's take a look at how they parse this. Amar lahem heviu achichem hakaton elai. Yosef tells his brothers, produce Binyamin for me. Lakachat Shimon ba'asar oto leinehem. He incarcerates Shimon. Because it would seem here, based on this first reading, as a punitive measure, Shimon had pushed him into the pit, right? Or he was the ringleader. He was the one who was involved the most. Ufeirash oto me Levi shelo yitlu alav etza. And Yosef wanted to separate Shimon from Levi so that there wouldn't be another Shechem happening in Egypt. So if you'll permit me, rather than level the serious charge against Yosef of taking revenge for what Shimon had done to him, which is what you were alluding to, which I think is a fair reading, that he had just heard Reuven, with his charata and saying, okay, I'm not going to punish Reuven, who's next in line, Shimon, right? or Shimon especially because of what he's done to me. The Midrash, I feel here, understands Yosef's move to detain Shimon as a self-defense mechanism. Yosef, argues the Midrash, suspected that Shimon might again try to rally his brothers to kill him since he stood in their way of obtaining food. Not killing Yosef, but killing Tzafnat Paneach. Yosef was scared of Shimon, knowing what Shimon's potential was, right? And he knew Shimon's volatile nature, and he wanted to separate him from Levi, fearing that together the unrestrained brothers might do to Egypt what they had done to Shechem. Now you can come back to me and say, Tamar, come on, you're going too far with this Bereshit Rabbah, because the Bereshit Rabbah, all it's telling me here is that Shimon threw him into the pit, and that's why Yosef wanted to incarcerate him and make sure that he was separated from Levi. However, what I did not do is I did not bring the versions of this Midrash from a different version in Midrash Hagadol, which expands on the fear that Yosef felt about Shimon and Levi united. So one could say that it wasn't a punitive measure. I would like to see it like that, just because Yosef had tzaddik, because I think it would be very hard to explain Yosef, singling out Shimon for punishment. Although, please feel free to argue with me on that. I would prefer to say Yosef understood the acute danger of Shimon and Levi together, the acute immediate danger to himself and to Paro. And that is how in the version in Midrash HaGadol plays out, where there's this whole scene where Shimon and Levi are starting to draw swords, and Yosef tells Menashe, his son, stamp on the ground, and he does so, and the whole of Egypt shakes. And then the sons of Yaakov are like, something weird is going on here, because only we have that kind of power. It's a dramatic scene that is a fully midrashic, and I didn't bring that version here because I didn't want to get too derailed. But suffice it to say, what I think that is clear that emerges here is that Chazal blame Shimon for the sale of Yosef, for wanting to kill Yosef. And it's with that idea that I want to end today's shiur, because we're drawing to an end, all the while realizing that we're going to continue Shimon next week. I would have loved to wrap up each Shevet in a week. It seems like I'm unable to do that. And so I ask for your patience in extending Shvatim over the course of 2 weeks. So I just want to end with why Chazal believed that Shimon hated Yosef so much. Again, the textual pin is that Yosef incarcerates Shimon, so that there must be some reason, there must be some back relationship between Yosef and Shimon, or some reason why he singles out Shimon, because Shimon's a bit figure, he's a secondary personality. And I think that the reason is exactly the same for the reason why Shimon is identified as the protagonist or the leader of the massacre of Shechem. Just to be very careful here, Shimon and Levi both, Shimon v'Levi achim, klei chamas mecherotehem, Yaakov says. The two of you are brothers, and I'm going to curse you together. However, given that they diverge so dramatically over the course of their tribal development, Chazal are going to always want to paint Shimon in a negative light so that they can redeem Levi, who as a tribe is redeems himself over and over and over again. So they're going to redeem Levi even back in these early stories of the two brothers, Shimon and Levi. So Levi doesn't play as much of a figure in the plot to kill Yaakov, the plot to kill Yosef. Levi doesn't play as much of a figure in the destruction of Shechem. It will be, Chazal will say, will want to find Shimon as the main threat here. And why? Shimon was, as I had said, very concerned, acutely concerned with the integrity of Am Yisrael. And when he sees Yosef with his dreams of dominance, Yosef with his dreams of supremacy over his brothers, then on the superficial level, let's remember who's next in line for the Bechorah after Reuven. That would be Shimon, right? Shimon is the second born, and Reuven had sinned, and that was something that was known to everybody. And so it was sensed or known that Reuven was on shaky ground. So Shimon, on the one hand, one can say on a personal level, felt, a certain primacy over Yosef, and would have felt that more acutely perhaps than the other brother. So when Yosef comes with his dreams, right, it's an attack really on Shimon's own aspirations to the leadership of the nation, which will come into further expression in Bamidbar and Zimri, in the showdown between Zimri and Moshe. But beyond that, and here I think is getting to the true nature of the tribe. Yosef is a dangerous person because he's a charismatic, and he's a dreamer. And as Chazal, so one of the most beautiful midrashim, that are teased out from these psukim of the sale of Yosef, Vayiro Tomer Achok, and they say, Hine Bal HaChalomot halazeh ba. The Bal HaChalomot is coming, the owner of dreams, or the master of dreams. And Chazal here say, this one is going to bring us all to Baal worship. That the brothers saw in Yosef the dangers of charisma, the dangers of open-ended dreaming, and these were acute and they were real, because the constant idolatrous tribes within Am Yisrael are the sons of Rachel. They're Dan and they're Yosef. There's Ephraim and Menashe and Dan. And these are the three descendants, essentially, of Yosef. Binyamin less so, but we'll get to him when we get to him. But it was not a false fear. And the fear that Shimon felt about the potential damage to the integrity of the character of Am Yisrael was a fear that the Bnei Leah carried with them and still carry with them to our day. And I know I'm over time, but I'll just end with this. The Bnei Leah and the Bnei Rachel are the two dominant forces within Am Yisrael, Leah and Rachel. And they represent very broadly, they represent many things, but broadly speaking, they represent two different approaches. The Bnei Leah represent the approach of protection of the integrity of Am Yisrael, of the Am HaNivchar, of the Am Levadad Yishkon, the nation that dwells apart from the other nations. The sons of Rachel are the ones who are the providers for the world, the ones who integrate within the family of nations, the ones who are the most open to Am Yisrael's place within the world. Both of these visions are sacred. They're often at loggerheads one with the other. And here is one major event of the loggerhead of the difficulties that the Bnei Leah have with Yosef. And they're very real. Again, with Yosef himself, perhaps not, Yosef HaTzadik, but with the descendants of Yosef, oh boy, did they bring Bnei Yisrael to Baal worship. So when Shimon is saying, Hine Bal HaChalomot halazeh ba, he's saying this one is a dangerous one, and I'll just end with this, and I'll just one paragraph, and then I'll end the shir, and everybody can go back to their day. So Shimon might have had when a teenage Yosef shared his dreams of supremacy with his brothers, Shimon was the one who called for his murder. Perhaps Yosef's charisma, also his strong sexual allure. He's identified over and over again by Chazal as being beautiful. He's identified in the text as being beautiful. He's beautified by his father. He carries the beauty of his mother. He's always primping his hair and turning up his feet and doing his eyes. And he's a beautiful and charismatic and individual with sexual allure. Acutely disturbed Shimon's well-honed sense of sexual morality and integrity, which again was well-honed in that formative engagement with Shechem. Now, here's where I'll end. Apart from issues of Yosef's personality, though, Shimon may have had a more basic concern, right? As next in line to lead the clan after Reuven, he felt that his personal status was threatened, or maybe like his older brother Reuven, he lobbied for the dominance of Leah over Rachel and felt very hurt by Yaakov's preference for the Ben Rachel. One thing is certain. His national vision demanded equality among the brothers, and Yosef's claims to dominance deeply insulted that vision. And I know that many of you will agree with me about the following. A charismatic individual encourages adoration. From there, it is only a short leap to deification. Shimon and his brothers deeply feared that Yosef would bring the children of Israel to idolatry of one form or another. This, according to the Midrash, was Shimon's key contention, his justification for attacking Yosef. Okay, so with this, we'll leave off for today and pick up Ezrat Hashem next week with the curse that Yaakov levels on his son Shimon and how that manifests itself in the development of Shimon into a Shevet. But so far, what we've developed of Shimon is one who is zealous for the integrity of Am Yisrael, and perhaps also jealous for his own position within the sons of Yaakov. So now I will take any questions that you may have. First, I'll go to the chat. Zahava asks, "Isn't this collective punishment of Shimon?" If Zahava, if you're still here and you want to clarify that question, then I'm happy to hear.
Of Shem.
Yeah.
Of Shem.
A collective punishment of Shem.
About Shem.
Yes. Thank you for that question. That is a classic ethical conundrum, right? And it happens quite often in Tanakh, where an entire city is punished for what seemed to be the sin of the few. It will happen again with Giv'ah. The entire city, up through the animals, and are all burned and totally massacred and destroyed. The entire Binyamin is all massacred. So that's a great question, Zahava. I wish I had an easy answer for that. I would say that one way to look at it would be that this was the Yaakov's clan's way of establishing their foothold over this land, establishing their imprint onto their enemies. Whether it is ethically justified or not is a question that I personally haven't explored in this shiur, and I haven't explored of late. But I think it's an excellent question, and I'm sure is addressed by Chazal and the Mefarshim.
Yes, they are. Tamar, this is Sandra Rappaport, and to answer the question also, Ramban Maimonides actually addresses it directly, and he says, look, if you think that Shechem the prince and his father were the only ones who knew that the kidnap was going on, and the only ones who heard her crying, the servants heard her crying, the people who served in the palace heard her crying, it was known that she was crying. And so the complicitness of not only the actor in the kidnap and rape, but the people surrounding it. And in fact, this resonates with people who either deal with or are helping in sexual intimidation and rape, even to this day, that there's always a community around the rapist that supports and allows it. So Ramban, I actually thought it was very forward thinking of him. He comes down very strongly, Maimonides, saying the entire town, the city knew what was going on, and they were all complicit.
Right. Sorry, go on.
No, so there. So
that seems to be a very corners what's the expression? Not squares away the corner. Is it? It solves the problem. It solves the problem.
Doesn't solve it so much as it explains it partially, because even it resonates very truly, even to this day. This isn't something that's happened 2,000 years ago and is beyond our ken, that we can't even understand or appreciate. This literally happens today, yesterday, and tomorrow. That these
absolutely
in isolation, they happen in a community.
Right. As witness the testimony of the returned hostages. Right?
100.
Just want to say that Idan Alexander is back.
Oh,
He
Oh,
went to
thank you for
Slav
such-
Adom and they were on their way to Ichilov. I don't know if
Oh,
we got
such
to
wonderful-
Ichilov yet, but yeah.
Thank you for sharing that wonderful ray of light, that wonderful news. And Zmira, in response to your question, not that I'm aware of, is the Midrash concerned about the women and children? Perhaps the answer that is it the Ramban or Rambam or
Rambam had spoken primarily, I think he said that the community itself was responsible, but I think he was responding to the point of the males were being targeted by Shimon and Levi, and in fact, whether the women and children, in fact, were taken as concubines or wives among the children of Jacob later, you know.
Yeah. So I am given what Sandra has just taught us, and it's I'm not aware. I don't know what the source is, if this is a novel reading of the Ramban or if this is sourced in Chazal, because it's not something that I explored, but it's a fascinating question. Are there any other questions or comments? Okay.
No,
Well, then,
but Tamar, please stay on
sure.
a few minutes.
Sure.
Thank you very
Okay.
much.
All right. My
Okay.
pleasure. I just want to make sure that the recording is stopped. Let's see. I will stop recording now. Okay. Be well, everyone.
Okay.